Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about time waste. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, what would you say are the primary sources of wasted time in your software team? Well, I will divide this question into two parts. I will say that there are things that delay teams, which you can make an argument for is wasted time, but I like to say that this is slightly different. And there are things that are really wasting, like actively wasting time. Let me explain that a little bit. So I would argue that the number one thing that delays a project or makes things take longer than they have to is usually dependencies. And the reason why I say that is because when you have a dependency to somebody else, it usually means that somebody else has to do something before you and you can do your thing. And in many cases, depending on the organization, that can actually delay things by days. If you've ever been in a situation where you need like support from a third-party company or something like that, emailing back and forth and setting up meetings and alignment and getting people scheduled. I mean, these things take time. You can it can delay like a simple thing to like indefinitely because you're basically waiting for somebody else to do something before you can move forward with your thing. And so that I will argue is the number one waster usually, but the problem, as I said, or like the thing about that is that usually you don't sit and just roll your thumbs when that is happening. In my world, the thing that wastes time is when you're actively spending time on something that is not value building or is like poorly done or something like that, when you could have been putting that time into something productive. And as long as you have your time to put on something. If you're waiting for something, you can still put that time onto something useful. But if you're wasting it, you're basically doing things that do not fulfill any really, like it's time that you're not going to get back. You can't use it in any other way, right? So for delays, dependencies are surely one of them. And a second one would be educating and aligning people. That also takes a long time, and you can make an argument. I'm not going to lie, it's a little bit of a blurry area here for me as well, because if you have quite a lot of people that say are new to the job, or in many cases, especially when you get to the higher levels of like when you need to talk with more and more stakeholders, the more stakeholders you have, the more different teams you have, and the less educated their product owners and middle managers are, the more time you will spend aligning people. There is nothing that wastes time or like delays things as much as trying to get like a big project off the ground, because there's so many people and departments involved in doing that in a larger organization that you have to spend tons of time educating, preparing slideshows, presentations continuously, and especially if you have people who may not be so cooperative with you or like not really have an interest, like you have no idea how long it can take, guys. The longest story card that it took me to ever make took 5 months, and I'm not joking. It took 5 months because every single time I sat down with the team's product owner, I could not explain to this individual what needed to be done, because the individual in question did not have the necessary education to actually understand what it was that we were requesting, and they plain out refused to allow me to talk to the other software developers in their team, because that quote unquote was not how they did things. And that it was impossible to make any headway, because you're basically in a situation, it's sort of like, you know, it's like a doctor or a mathematician or something like that who's trying to achieve something. They have all this experience and all this education, and the only way they can possibly make headway is to get a stamp of approval from someone who's completely ignorant of their entire field. So the only option they have is to educate them in meetings, 1-hour meetings, over a span of several months, because they don't have that person does not have time to sit in like a week-long session, and they're apparently not able to understand that this is probably a decision that I should not do. I should probably fork that off to someone who's more educated. This happens, guys. This happens all the time. Oh, and I swear to you, this happens in politics. Holy shit, this happens in politics. Anywho, the waster though. the thing that I will give you that's a bit of a blur, right? But the real true time waster I've always found touches on the same sort of things. It is when software developers are, when you create a team of software developers who lack the necessary skill sets or the experience and so forth to create well-working, simple and well-structured solutions, and they get into usually they have a lot of ideas on how to do things the correct way. What software developers will do very quickly is that they will start wasting tons of time on things that are completely pointless, that are not value building, and in many cases they will create legacy code, or they will create situations where they can't really make a lot of headway because they lack the necessary mental tools to solve said problem in an organized fashion. I'll give you a few examples. So one of the things that will waste quite a lot of time is if there is no documentation for a complicated ecosystem of services. What's going to happen is that the onboarding process of your team is going to be measured in days, and in some cases times weeks. The reason being because you have not taken the time to make sure that all of these different things that live inside of like whoever who's working there, who's managed to find the time to learn all this stuff, that they all know this sort of stuff, that it's all written down, that it's all structured in some way, which means that they have to go on a journey of discovery before they can make any type of headway with the thing that is going to produce money for the company. And that is to basically learn how to do like the most basic things. And the less structured your work environment is, the longer it's going to take. The less experience and less talented the software developer, the longer it's also going to take. This is the main argument people have usually against junior software developers, because they don't lack the, I guess I've said in other videos, guys, the idea that there is like a sweet spot for how much a person on average should be able to produce, etc., etc. It's really not down to that. It's down to talent. The top-notch software developers, the top performers, they will outperform multiple, in some cases, multiple other software developers of lower talent. Not because the typing is faster, but because they're smarter, and they have more experience, and they understand how to do things in a way that makes other work unblock. That's the thing that sort of ties into what I was saying earlier. If you have truly talented software developers, they will be able to structure code in a simple way, to set up secure, easy to follow work processes, document the things that are necessary, and talk to stakeholders in such a way that all of this sort of fits together. They basically they create an architecture, a systematic architecture around the entire team and the code that is well working, and means that people who don't have like their genius level understanding of things can adopt these things in an easier way. That's sort of what frameworks are about, by the by. You know, people who are contributing to like different libraries and things like that, they're trying to simplify your work process. In some cases the simplification is amazing. It's on top of something that is really, really complicated, but it makes other people more productive, right? These are the things that are like, these things unblock people from wasting time on, as I said, pointless things that could have been solved. I have another example. Like the other day I was working with a team that had they had a senior level consultant. I don't even want to know how much time this has cost the company. Sit down and write a basically a small Bible on how to name the files. I'm completely serious, and some of you might think that that's well, obviously you need to have an agreement on how to name the files. My argument is very simple. The thing that happened was that this person was getting bothered by the fact that they kept on getting feedback from all the developers, and they all had different opinions about how to name the file. And it was the question of, should it be uppercase or lowercase, the first letter? Should, like in this case it was a TypeScript project, should you use an index file or should you not use an index file? And I saw these people over the span of, I think, a few weeks by now, discuss back and forth, like vigorously discuss, well, I don't like how it looks if you don't have the index files. I don't like searching, and that doesn't work for my workflow. Like they bickered about this point. It's almost like double quotes versus single quotes. It's a completely pointless discussion that is completely subjective. You're never going to have it right. And so finally, after all this time wasted into this discussion, they finally arrive at something that, like, they've written it down, and they start to realize the thing that I finally go in and basically explain to them. Guys, get your shit together. This is not productive. This is a waste of time. just agree on something, vote for all I care on how to name this file, and move on. And then the question arrives, oh yeah, but then if we do it this way, because this way is sort of already this is how it's being done right now, and now we have to rename all the files. And I go, no, you don't have to rename all the files, because the thing that is happening now is completely pointless. You are trying to satisfy your own mental gremlins to have this quote-unquote perfection level state where you can all agree on how to do this. And you have. You just wrote it down. This is the practice you follow now. It does not matter that the rest of the code base is not following that practice, because you can Boy Scout that. Every time you make a new pull request, you can fix, quote-unquote, the problems. But rewriting the whole thing just so that it's aligned is going to waste tons of time. It's going to take many, many days of work, probably even more than that, for someone who's being paid to do something that brings money to the company. This does not bring money to the company. It brings mental satisfaction to you. It is a complete waste of time. And the second you get another person in here, or a few of you move to another team, and like we switch out the team, someone else is going to come along and say, well, I don't like double quotes, I want single quotes, and now we are going to rewrite everything to single quotes. And so this is a completely bullshit thing that you're doing. Software developers do this quite a lot, where they might change a library for another library just because they like it. Like, there's no value, net gain for the company in this whatsoever. And this comes down, as I said, to personal maturity, talent, aptitude, etc., etc. Because the really, really talented senior level software developers should be able to spot these sorts of completely arbitrary, meaningless discussions and put in place things that rectify that situation, so you don't have to have a lot of time wasted on discussing these practices, or discussing or having time wasted on implementing solutions that are going to cause a lot of bugs, etc., etc. It's that experience that prevents time from being wasted. So what I want you to take away from this is that the number one source of wasted time, I would say, in terms of delays, it's all basically always going to be dependencies, or having to align a lot of people, because the more people you have, the more room for discussion you have, or the more discussions you need. And I, honest to God, guys, the time it takes to talk through all the things with all the people sometimes it takes longer to do that in terms of total time than the entire project is going to take. And in terms of wasted time, the number one time waster is software developers who focus on things that are not value building in any way, where they have a preference for something, or they have a mental itch that they need to scratch or something like that, and they will waste tons of time on trying to force people to do pair programming when it's not really actually helping anybody. They're going to force people to try to use a specific library, or rewrite the code base in a different language. They're going to try to they're not going to document things that are important, or things like that. They're not going to think in terms of a systematic approach. And this is the thing that I argue is that's the mark of the really senior, experienced software developers who understand how to deliver software well. They understand that it is more important to create a streamlined work process, and in essence, sometimes I even go as far as to say that let the tech lead just sit down, write down all the rules for everything, completely opinionated, say you name things this way, that way, etc., etc., and then if somebody really has a problem with it, you can talk about it and fix it. But if it's like a power vacuum, when something is lacking, if there's a power vacuum and there's an area for a discussion, the wrong group of people will waste so much time bickering back and forth, and not be like children, not being able to just understand that it does not matter. Just pick something. It's completely arbitrary. You could resolve that entire situation in a fraction of a second if you just understood that your personal flavor of how to use quotes or lines or something like that is completely irrelevant. You just pick something, write it down if that's necessary, and then move on, because it doesn't actually gain you anything to have this discussion. It's just something in your head. Have a great day.